Well, hello and welcome. Stacy Murphy here from Dreaming Earth, and today I have with me Joshua Hughes from BlackSheep US and RewildOrganics.org. Welcome, Joshua.
Hi, hello, Stacy. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, great to have you here. So, we're here to talk about regenerative agriculture, and we're here to break the myth that regenerative agriculture is not just about the soil, that it's more than that. And
Hmm.
so, my first question with you, Joshua, is why is it that you got into what you're doing today?
Oh, my path. I grew up a recycler. I grew up in a wrecking yard with, kind of finding gold in what other people considered waste, and it led me into recycling. And the deeper I got into recycling at scale, the less impressed I was with it. I really felt like people were like we were all kind of having uh, we were we were convincing ourselves that single use items were okay, uh, things that making garbage was no big deal because it would just all get fixed after me. um, as I became kind of disillusioned with the recycling industry as a whole, I was searching for ways to make an impact. And also I'd become very activated by forestry activism and anti-war activism in the early 2000s, as our country really shifted after 9/11. So I becoming an activist, becoming someone that wanted to figure out my niche and how I could help and what I could do other than getting pepper sprayed and arrested. 'Cause that served a little purpose in my life. It taught me some things, but it also taught me that I wanted to do productive things and teach my child how to say yes to things, not just no. And it led me into joining some community supported agriculture programs in Eugene, Oregon, and Portland, Oregon. And I learned a lot about food and how food could maybe be the the nexus of a bunch of our problems and a bunch of our solutions. Like I think food could be a way of fixing the planet instead of being such a detrimental thing as it's become, the industry of food. So I it led me on a path to go and give it a shot. And a lot of people in my circle and a lot of people in the circles around me, I think, sit around and talk about having a community farm or a community village where we do things different, and we uh, we grow our own food and we figure out how to be a part of like maybe a parallel infrastructure that we desire to see in the world. And I did that with a group of about 15 of my friends in Costa Rica. I picked Costa Rica because I wanted to be somewhere where I had like an eternal spring where I could keep trying things with agriculture. I wanted to be leaning into on biodiversity and and forestry. So it kept Costa Rica's goals in mind are very similar as in, like the goals of the government there. Um, and also I wanted to be somewhere where uh, Costa Rica doesn't have a military. They don't really go on those kind of adventures, and they've set different goals for themselves to be like leading the pack when it comes to a regenerative planet. And it is a country of duality. At the same time, we use more agrochemicals than anywhere else in the world per meter. So, but that's a legacy that we're facing and that we're dealing with. The deforestation in Costa Rica is very real. While on the other hand, we have amazing national parks and little spots full of biodiversity worth tending to. So I chose this path because I wanted to make a difference and I wanted to eat healthy and have fun while I did it. And I wanted to be surrounded and keep building nature systems that would tend to the biodiverse future I wanted to see as an activist and as a citizen of this planet, and as a recycler, as somebody who's spent most of their life trying to help others and businesses do better at recycling. um, that was never enough for me. So I chose to be in an area that really needed kind of more of not a recycling, but I think an upcycling, to lift it back into productivity and see the value in what maybe the bigger systems of the past and the bad ideas of the past had been willing to sacrifice and leave. So the area I chose to be in was deforested as far as you could see. Um, when I got there, or right before I got there, especially in the 40 years before that, it had been totally devastated. So, I chose to go to an area that needed help and that was experiencing a lot of the other challenges, not just the nature challenges, but the brain drain and the urbanization that was happening and the kids leaving because there wasn't opportunity in these areas that used to be so rich. So just a generation or two ago. So um, that's why I chose to do what I do where I do. What I do now is really a refinement of having thousands of people come through to help volunteer, participate, teach, and learn at my space. Um, that was unexpected. I didn't expect that to happen. So where I'm at now is a collaboration of thousands of teachers, students, and neighbors that have been vocal about what they need and learning how to ask for the right things and experiment and try things. So at my place, I've got to experiment a lot and see what works. It's been quite an adventure.
I love that. And I love what you said about showing your kids how to say yes to something versus how to say no to something. And what's
Yeah.
so beautiful is the moment you said yes to it, you found all the other people saying yes to it. They all came
Yeah,
to
people
help and
started showing
support it.
up, and I had no idea. I felt alone a bit at first as an activist sometimes, and especially when you're getting um, pepper sprayed over a peace march at a Thursday afternoon farmers market. For some reason, pepper spray had to come out. I started to feel pretty cynical about change, and I started to feel like big systems were never going to listen. Um, so it helped drive me into the
Mhm.
yeses I needed, but I didn't know them when I got to Costa Rica personally. I planted a lot of trees while thinking about this, and I figured I might as well be planting trees with my friends while we discuss the bigger challenges the world faces. And over in short order, those trees started producing this massive surplus, or started creating surplus in ways that I didn't understand, but started to see, like surplus of shade and aquifer water exchange with the sky and the bugs and the frogs, and creeks running year round instead of going dry. And I had maybe been thinking, this is kind of happens politically in the US. We tend to try and make impacts across our whole country, or we think maybe presidential politics are where we should throw our energy, and some of it maybe, but I wasn't getting any wins on the daily. It was a lot of like, just nothing ever seemed to change. Although we need people to lean in on that, and I'm glad
Mhm.
people have the energy for that. Um, Seeing and hearing frogs come back to a creek, and seeing a creek come back in 3 seasons, really motivated me. And I was really motivated by the little successes, which is an important thing if you're going to live your life in activism or activated to change things, is that you win sometimes.
Yeah.
So I like the little positive yeses and the little wins, and it comes with nature. It also comes with community, and some of the things that also seem really insurmountable, like my neighbors' kids all move into the city for opportunity. Their kids are now in their 30s, and they're back in our little village because of just some little tweaks to the way we do business there, and the way that my neighbors choose to collaborate. So I'm, seeing results in much faster than I thought I would, and then also much slower than I ever expected to in the bigger things. But but yeah, I chose to have little yeses, and it inspires me daily.
Amazing. And so all those little yeses, let's sort of fast forward to this moment and talk about what is Black Sheep US and what is Rewild Organics.
So on the ground, we have a farm called VerdEnergia Pacifica in our little village of Lanes, in an area called Puriscal in the western slopes of Costa Rica. And it was our first 20 acres we bought in 2006, and really did uh, go down there to learn and see what was possible. And we bought denuded cattle land and pig farm. And after years of planting and learning and having hundreds and hundreds of people come through to help, or thousands now, um, we and collaborating more and more with our neighbors as we grew and started understanding each other. Uh, we identified a lot of the problems that we were having as a small farm, how we could grow, how we could maybe bring goods to the world, how we could maybe affect change by showing, like, maybe somebody trying this amazing turmeric we grow with the flavor profile of something that's grown in such healthy soil, or with the way that we dry it slow or keep things raw, like these little things we were doing. I want the world to taste it. I mean, I thought I didn't like pineapple as a kid because I had canned pineapple on like Pizza Hut or something. And I got to my farm and tried a fresh pineapple that was picked ripe instead of green, and it changed, blew my mind, changed my world. As everything was doing there, but then I'd run into the barriers of bringing a small farm good from the end of a long dirt road in the middle of a developing nation, quote unquote. Um, that the challenges were real, and I was really starting to understand on my own farm and my own level, like why things aren't changing at a global scale, because there's some really serious gaps in the supply chain to connect like these great ideas to the quote unquote markets or people's faces or whatever, their bellies. Um, So I listened. We were listening to ourselves, our own needs, and we were listening to our neighbors and the co-ops and the Ministry of Agriculture. And I'd spent years building relationships with neighbors and co-op in Puriscal, and we were all having the same kind of challenges. So Black Sheep was born out of the need to build some of those infrastructure pieces at a collective way, in a way that smaller farms could tap into. Um, After a couple years of helping integrate like investment opportunities and thinking through how small farms could um, become worth investing in the medium and long term. Really diving into that. So Black Sheep maybe had the privilege and the ability to spend decades doing research on these things, and I wanted to be able to offer that opportunity, not just to our own little farm, but to the collective around me of neighbors. Um, so Black Sheep was born out of it's a necessary tool for small farmers. We used to have a lot more co-ops in the world and like granges to help on this, but in Costa Rica, those co-ops are really focused maybe just around coffee or just around pineapples, and there wasn't a lot going on to help the small farmer that was innovating and coming up with maybe small, and I don't mean small, but a couple hectares here and a couple hectares there of production of maybe a superfood or something, or something like turmeric. People really want in the U.S. How do we connect this to the market? So, after years of doing the work on the ground and helping with the farming tactics and the way that we can process things, because that's a big piece of what Black Sheep is helping connect dots on, small farmers having access to like processing equipment, which we spoke of a few minutes ago, like some of those missing links, where somebody who has a 1 acre farm in the jungle isn't going to maybe go spend $1 million on processing equipment, but collectively, Black Sheep feels called to do that and be a part of building that supply chain connection. Um, and then Rewild Organics it was birthed out of that need too, for farmers and ourselves and other farms around us to have a more direct connection with at least a percentage of the customers that we're going to have in the world, so that we can make some of the value adding uh, gains stick to the farms and stick to the land and the farmer, because so much of the money that you spend at the store doesn't go to the farmer. I think it's kind of ridiculous. Something like 6% of what you spend on a good at the store might go to the person who grew it. Um, so being in that middleman game a bit and letting the farms participate in a collaborative way is why Rewild Organics was birthed. And I hope to see thousands of brands pop up just like us, where we're connecting direct from farms or farm collectives to the markets. So that's why we felt the urge, and we take the risks too. Black Sheep was designed to maybe take on those risks. So small farmers in my neighborhood aren't the ones that have to pioneer this new way. They can do what they do best, but not take the risk of like losing their land. I did not move to Central America to relive or become an accidental uh, neo-colonialist. History has not been kind to the small farmer in Central America. The nicest way
Mm-hmm.
I could say that. So I'm really conscious of not repeating those mistakes. So we're letting entities in the U.S. take some of the risk, of making retail and value-added goods, figure out how to do packaging, all the things that small farm holders, landholders really never get to be a part of, and then they're just a part of the commodities game, and that is a race to the bottom on prices that leaves most people not wanting to farm at all. So.
Amazing. And so what I love about what you're sharing is, when most people think about regenerative agriculture, the first thing they think about is the carbon sequestration of the soil, the biodiversity of the soil, the water cycles of the soil, all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been describing three aspects that are really incredible in the regenerative space, which is, yes, there's all the biodiversity of the land. And you went from a land that had been clear cut to something
Mm-hmm.
that now the biodiversity is coming back. And then the community, you're talking about connecting the dots between all of the people, is another aspect of this. And then the third aspect as a result is the economics of this as
Mm-hmm.
well. So there's these exchange, people, and biodiversity aspects to regeneration. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious, if you were to describe what you thought regenerative agriculture was, or what does regenerative mean in general, what would you say?
Well, first of all, what you just described is perfect because I've been in permaculture kind of brought me into this world. And a lot of people haven't scaled permaculture in a way that's really impressive in the agricultural world, but it's people care, earth care, and fair share. So there's the three things you just described kind of fit right into that as you said that. So regenerative ag, or regenerative agriculture, I take the word culture part of that pretty seriously. We don't want a top-down answer for these things, and um, carbon, while it's important that we're thinking about that, and it's a way that's quantifiable in the short term, I guess, or easy enough with satellite tracking or whatever, soil testing. It's a quantifiable number that people can understand, and it's something that maybe the world spent many years already branding, that we need to think about our carbon impact. And so that's, I'm glad that exists, but it's been done in a real abstract way that doesn't really benefit farmers like on my street. So it's not the number one thing you can come into this for. If I would have shown up with my ideas of being, storing carbon in the soil as my mantra when I got to the jungle, I would, um, I don't. I think that leaves behind the people that are going to actually make sure that happens in in the medium and long term. So it's not just some answer that comes from science or from above or whatever that is, and tells them what they have to do. And then there's no, when there's no economics behind it, there's no community behind it. In 25 years, they burn those trees to make fuel again because you forgot about the humans. And or we end up in a world where we have a kind of conservationism that is, my partner Amanda calls fortress conservationism, where it's people are kind of kept away, and we end up with just the national park systems, and then it becomes, for tourists to enjoy, but not for communities to live in. So I think regenerative ag, while in the beginning I started planting trees, I was planting those trees with people. And most of my day wasn't seeing the results immediately. I'm planting trees, for God's sake. It's slow. I have a pretty fast personality type. Now I do get 20 feet of rain a year in my village, so the trees do grow really fast. But still, if I was just doing the science and waiting around, I mean that's, you do some work, you wait months, you see what happens, you wait years while cover crops do their work or whatever it is. All those years, you're still living in a community and you're still trying to figure out how to make a living with your neighbors and not be an island of positivity in the middle of misery. Because frankly, it's not very. I mean, the campesinos, the farmland of the world is can be depressing. It's getting, people are getting old. Youth aren't following in their footsteps. Like they're, it's. I didn't want to be an island. I'm not an island. I'm not a small boat. I'm a big boat theory kind of guy. So it became apparent rather quickly that without people, without neighbors, without thinking that through, you could really end up in a deep progress trap that is fixing the world, but moving everyone into cities against their will, maybe. And I'm not opposed to people living in cities. I like the city. Like, I love art. I love collaboration. I like cosmopolitanism. Uh, uh, but I like choice as well. So where we're at, I figured if we could give this a good shot, and do the regenerative action from, I don't say the bottom up, but from the community out, from the farmers out, that we wouldn't, well, frankly, one day we're going to wake up to like dictatorships to protect the last of nature. And I don't want it to come from the top down. We need this to come from us out, and we need it to be owned by our communities. So my area was very much becoming like a cattle baron kind of area where one family or five families own most of the area. Um, it's just as important to me as we build soil that it's owned again by thousands of people as it is that the soil is healthy. So
Mm.
yeah, regenerative ag to me is a comprehensive look at how farming, food production, food availability, biodiversity, human culture all mix to create something that will actually work. It's not rocket science, and we did it for millennia, or maybe hundreds of thousands of years. Humans fit in pretty well to these systems, although we don't like feast or famine. We don't like starving, and that's a part of nature systems. But I think we can integrate our technology now in a way that we haven't had the chance to do before, because high tech is sort of new. But when I talk about technology, I don't just think of high tech. I think of community technology. I think of human technology. I think of local technology, nature technology. So integrating technology and not being a total luddite to the high technology too myself. I uh, I think that's all a big part of how we're going to have food systems that work, and food is very important. We all need it. several times a day. Um, yeah, and we're feeling the pinch now in the last years of what's happened to the environment because of monocultures. And we say monocultures, it's not just about the one type of food. Yeah, sure, it's monoculture in the field, but it turns the whole part of the whole region of the country into a monoculture as well with the humans. So I really didn't. I brought that attitude to the game, and uh, regenerative ag is a nice way of explaining it, I think now.
Mhm.
And to be actually regenerative ag certified, I think you probably need to pass about 30 different certifications, which include things like this. So it's, it's not lost, it's coming around there. And I'd hope that more and more people demand regenerative ag as where they can source their stuff from. I did it with CSAs and knew right where my tomato was coming from.
Mhm.
You need to do that with your coffee as well, or your chocolate, because don't, it's maybe far away, but I'm hoping we're in a world where soon enough we're kind of in a CSA, regenerative agriculture, community supported agriculture mindset with all the things we purchase.
Yeah. Well, and we're having this conversation via Zoom. And I know
Hmm.
you're in the United States now, but we could be having this conversation with you in Costa Rica. So why wouldn't I have a CSA that came out of Costa Rica?
That's right. That's right.
And a couple things I loved about what you said. One is you have this honoring of all life, which I think is for me the heart of regenerative anything. And you talked multiple times about the biodiversity of everything, right? The choice of being able to live in the city, being able to live where you want to live, the types of ecosystems, and honoring the biodiversity that's there, right? And
Hmm.
and so I love that. And the other thing I loved about what you said was you used the word out instead of from the ground up. And I
Hmm.
really appreciate that because this up and down kind of it feels like this hierarchical thing, even if it's just our cultural
Hmm.
use of the words. And so out and in feels more inclusive, right? There's something about it that feels a little bit more like breathing in and out. Like
Hmm.
we as a human being, we breathe in and out and we interact with things. And the amount that we breathe out and we breathe in, that we can talk about versus up and down feels a little bit more hierarchical. And
Sure.
yeah, so I loved that framework that you used.
Well, it's my neighbors I've been there 17 years, and I didn't even really leave my space there for about 14. I didn't come back to the US for like 14 years. I just really wanted to completely buy into being a community member with the village that was already there. So um, they a lot of talk about themselves feeling poor, but they hold land and no debt. Like it's a weird thing. People who hold a lot of debt and a lot of paper feel so wealthy and they feel up. But my neighbors have a lot of fruit trees and a lot of arable land and no debt, and yeah, it's not up from them. It's just a matter of thinking differently, and then us learning how to organize those
Mhm.
resources
Yeah,
in a way that benefit us more. Where we don't
yeah,
send all the wealth off and away and up to
yeah.
societies that don't tend to look down on who they. And maybe it's a good way of thinking about it. Actually, as an American, saying that may have it saying down or up. It kind of helped me start to listen to myself and be like, oh, I listen to people around me. Like people are under you. That's not good. Um,
Mhm.
especially your food producers. I
Mhm.
It was very, for many years, it's been, especially since the Industrial Revolution, it's been like a sign of success to get away from using your hands or using your muscles to make a living or getting dirty. Um, and we talk about that as upward mobility, even. Yeah, you know, it's a way
Yeah,
of thinking we need to break.
yeah, it's interesting. When we were farming in Brooklyn, there was a lot of people in our neighborhood that were from the West Indies, and a lot of them had their grandparents were farmers, and they came to the United States to escape that sort
Hmm.
of right. And and then there's also groups of people who are wanting more access to the land, but don't necessarily have as much access, right, to the
Hmm.
land. So that's a whole nother concept. What I find interesting is exactly what you said is when I told people that I was a farmer back when I was running BK farmyards, the the difference between me telling them that I was an architect and an engineer and then telling them I was a farmer, I got totally different ways of engagement. And so
Yeah.
it just went to show for me how much farmers are looked down on. and
Hmm.
also the knowledge of this planet, this indigenous wisdom, this beautiful planet and all of its creatures and all of its beings and all of the interconnected wisdom of all of those entities that sometimes has been neglected. But I feel, I'm curious your perspective, I feel like there's been more and more value placed on indigenous wisdom and also the planet care aspect of this. I'm curious what it feels like in your world these days.
So, a lot of indigenous wisdom, from my perspective with food production, we put it that way, um, was taking advantage of millennia of knowledge of how feedback loops worked in nature already. And there were so many amazing positive feedback loops. The salmon came back every year. If you treated them right when they were leaving, enough of them would come back. And it seemed like almost mystical or magical, but it was like we were in line with, we hadn't like disrupted a bunch of conveyor belts of positiveness out of nature. So where I moved to in Costa Rica, like that, it had been a good couple generations since there had been positive feedback loops. Um, they had once the forest disappeared in whatever it was, the 40s, 50s, 1950s. Um, their grandparents, they talk about their great grandparents as like genius farmers because they had squashed the size of their bodies, but um, they just hadn't disrupted those systems, and the biodiversity under the soil was there, and the bacteria and the fungi needed, and all these things. Um, and then once it was denuded and the rain washed it all away, they felt like they had like lost this old knowledge. Well, more than anything, they'd lost the resources that were feeding back, and then the knowledge mattered even less. So chemical applications became the way of, was that soil in my area was a medium there to hold plants in place while petroleum grew them for like the last 70 years or something. So uh, yeah, that knowledge, it needs systems that function. You can't just come into my area now and say, this is how you do it because it always worked. Well, it did work when there were trees there, when the creeks worked, when erosion wasn't your biggest issue. Um, so it's we have to respect the earth, and then we can start to expect those ancient traditions to work again.
I
It's hard
love
for those
that.
to work, and it's not. We're not in a vacuum. It's not like,
Yeah.
and it wasn't magical. It
Yeah.
wasn't. It was a romance with nature, not magic.
Mhm.
And now, with all of those systems broken, what do you do?
Yeah.
You kind of
Yeah.
get sad, or you do something about it, start fixing those systems, and then at the same time tap into the knowledge, and while they still live, maybe, and then while people can still share,
Mhm.
and then let's start learning what to do with those positive feedback loops.
Yeah, I love that you said romance. So I want to talk about that a little bit. It sounds to, and I loved what you said about those practices. It right now we're in sort of restoration mode a bit,
Hmm.
right? And then maybe those other modes might work. And I love the idea of the conveyor belts of those feedback loops. Tell me more about what it would mean, because I kind of get a sense that you're doing this because you want the world to love the earth as much as you do, like that this romance of the earth is kind of the heart of all of this. Can you talk a little bit about what it means when you said romancing? What did you
Mm.
mean?
Well, I'm about as atheist as they get, so I find meaning still deeply in things, and uh, so the way I speak may sound a little different at times, but I'm in total awe of the universe and all the complexities and beautiful things and simplicities. Um, I grew up in and around near a place called Crater Lake in Southern Oregon. I was just an hour from there where I was born. And these areas that I thought were forests, where I ran around as a kid and cherished, and I have almost all my favorite memories, between like about Yosemite Valley and Crater Lake. That was my stomping grounds of being in the forest. And when I got a little older and I started driving myself, I'm now going to these places that I'd gone to as a child and realizing that they were tree stands, not forests, and that somebody owned them and took them. And I had, I don't know, I felt robbed of my my childhood memories in a way, or like those things were, disappearing. And they didn't, and then it was my naivete or whatever, but I didn't realize that the forest was mostly owned by a couple companies. And so I was, a lot of where I come from is I come from kind of a, I don't say, I mean, I get angry at times when I see things get destroyed. I see a redwood tree that shouldn't be cut or whatever. But I'm I'm mostly feeling like grief actually about losing things I truly love. So I'm trying to remember that when the things are still here and still worth loving, that it's a dance that I should participate in, because grief is real if you live long enough. And uh, and I'd hope that less and less of that, like that if I act on that and remember that we're losing something that's that extinction is forever. So I don't, I want to be a part of not extincting things around me. And I grew up in a wrecking yard where we poured oil on the ground because it controlled weeds. So I don't come from a perfect childhood or some ideal thing. I wasn't raised a jungle hippie, like I was raised in Medford, Oregon, very much a place where they cut the forest down for a living. Um, and even mentioning the word wolves there, like I like wolves, could get me in a fight with a cattle rancher, So, but yeah, I have a lot of love for it, and I feel it's the time I feel most at peace. And I think when people connect with nature enough, they tend to want to do better for it. So the first farm I created in Costa Rica was more about having a place that people could come and fall in love with nature. And once they do that, maybe they can take better steps, because it's not as abstract. It's very real. You're stepping on something that's beautiful when you clear cut it and put in monoculture pineapples. Uh, so yeah, that,
Yeah.
there's a lot to unpack there, and there's a lot of. I mean, I didn't grow up wealthy. I'm still not in any way financially wealthy, but um, I've had the privilege to take these steps and try things, and I feel honored to do that. And I have a community around me that keeps empowering me to keep trying things.
Yeah.
So it's a dance that I feel privileged to get to do over and over.
Yeah, that's a different definition of wealth. To
Yeah,
get to,
yeah. I haven't tried to earn money in 20 years, and
mhm,
I'm still eating, and I have nice
mhm,
properties with friends in collective ways, and
yeah.
I try to stay out of debt and all these things. And it's it's what most of the world kind of has to do. And I did when I moved to Costa Rica. I kind of burnt the ships behind me and decided not to fall back on. I wasn't going to really build like this corporate nest egg that my friends were doing, and it's led to a different kind of security. I trusted in trees, and now I have a tree trust. I have enough trees growing. Like I live in an area where it was completely cut down, so they made savanna out of what was the rainforest. The trees that I plant that will survive in this direct rain, sun, savanna type scenario there, um, aren't jungle trees. They'll like fall down once the jungle's there. So now I went from like locking myself to a log truck in Oregon to protect trees, to now planting trees that are going to be the furniture that my kids use. Um, and those pioneer species are going to bring back forests. So I shifted the way it helped shift the way I think, and I'm now building a trust in nature's functions for my long-term security and for my family's long-term security.
I love that idea. And I think there's a lot of people that you just helped who feel a bit of guilt and shame about what's going on the planet, and then
Mm,
sadness as well, right? Around what what how we have disrupted so many systems. And the good
mm,
news is we really can restore. We really can,
we can.
it's there's a lot of time to do this. And what's beautiful about what you said is you said you have a tree trust. And
Mhm,
that the concept of trusting nature is so
mhm.
interesting, because we are nature, but sometimes we forget. And so we'll go out into what we think is the wild, but we're kind of wild too.
We're
um
forest creatures. We
yeah,
forget this pretty
yeah,
quickly when we're in warm houses and stuff. But
yeah. So I have one last question for you, which is what would you ideally, what would you love to see with BlackSheep US and with Rewild Organics? What would you love to see happen next?
Well, I would love it if more people would start trusting in nature and investing in it. I think that a lot of us, we we do what we do to take care of our families in the long term and ourselves in the long term, and that's great. We need to start investing in nature systems personally. That's not waiting for big governments to take action.
Mhm.
Um, Not waiting for your greater community to even take action. Like, where are you and where can we invest in these systems? And that may just mean putting fruit trees in with a couple of neighbors to start. It may be, I mean, people in big cities have more opportunities than me to like start doing collaboration and big and systems change. I'm in the jungle, and not everybody needs to move down to the jungle to do what I've done. But it would be very, very good if more of the world would include in their like investment strategy, investing in nature and regenerative systems. Everybody wants sustainable. A lot of investment ideas, even they like want to be sustainable or green or whatever. Like, we can empower our own communities to do that too, not just abstractions and hoping that your like worldwide fund is giving 1% back to some cause. But I what I did, I decided to start a small farm out of a piece of denuded land with about 20 friends, and it's turned into now about 80 of us owning 6 or 7 different projects together. And so I would hope that more people would put their money where their hearts are. Um, and I see a lot of good energy in the world around this idea. Um, but I think we still operate a lot in fear and hoping that like we'll stay ahead of inflation with our investment portfolios, and you're not going to stay ahead of inflation from now on, pretty much. The world's in a different position than it was 60, 70 years ago. A lot of the formulas that our parents and our grandparents used to succeed and retire and thrive aren't going to be the same anyway. So it's time to reinvent those things anyway, take more responsibility for that. Um, yeah, and plant some trees with your friends, and fall in love with them, because they will take care of you if you'll take care of them. So I would hope people would do that and support companies like us and small farmers directly. I don't use the word like CSA lightly, community supported agriculture. I think that was a trigger in my heart and my mind, that we could think about agriculture differently, and it would actually change. Well, it also tastes better. You also have a better diet now. It's not just some abstraction. It's real. The amount of packaging you use will go down. You'll know your farmer's name. So supporting small farms like us around the world, um, would be something that I'd hope more and more people would do. Uh, and people out there that are manufacturing goods, and some of the bigger companies, if they're out there listening and they want to see how they can make an impact, be good to your farmer. Don't squeeze them so hard. The average age of farmer in the U.S. is like 60 years old now, and we need to motivate the youth into food production. So it needs to feel like there's a future in it. So, um, maybe if the farmer got a few more bucks per dollar, or a few more cents per dollar, uh, we'd have a bright food future. And if we can integrate that in with things like forestry and a couple other things, I think we're going to be doing very well. So, you said it right. There's still a chance to fix things. I was kind of hopeless, and then I saw success on the nature level. At least we'll see if people will buy enough ginger from my village to make a difference in the financial future. But the frogs are back, and being highly motivated by the wins in regenerative ag. People should come and appreciate that. Come to my little village if you'd like. Anybody wants to contact me through this, come and plant some trees with me, and we'll figure this stuff out together.
So speaking of ways that people can support you, I would highly recommend people go to rewildorganics.org. There's a bunch of products there. Your turmeric is there. There's
Hmm.
there's products there for people that they can support you today by watching
Yeah,
this
please.
video. Yeah.
Our golden milk is lovely, and our extracts and tinctures are a really good expression of what we're doing here in the jungle. So, that, and I couldn't meet it enough. Come jump in some clean river water in the jungle with us and plant some trees. At our space down there, we're doing some of the harder work, but we're also doing yoga and dancing and hula hooping our way through it. So, um, come have some fun with us while we learn how to do this together.
Yeah, wonderful. And I'm definitely coming. I'm coming
Yeah,
very
please.
soon. Let's do
No,
this.
I mean it.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And I know that this conversation is going to inspire and help people, and also probably activate them to go go out and maybe hug a tree, maybe plant a tree, maybe start a farm. Who knows? So thank you so much. We really appreciate you.
Oh, no, thank you.